Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and today we have acclaimed lighting designer Mark Stanley with us.
And this is David, coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
Oh, you went back to up again.
Yeah, I don't like low. I can't go low.
All right, fair enough, but I'm into the subs these days.
You are into the subs. I cannot compete. So I have to do my sort of fake falsetto sort of thing going on. But anyway, hey everyone, welcome to episode 168. And today we have an amazing show and a special guest, a very old friend. Not to say that he's old.
We're not old.
Because we're not old.
He's not old.
He's matured. It's Mark Stanley. Mark, it's great to have you here.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys.
Boy, after all these years, we've been trying to get him on the show, and he's here.
But he was willing from the get-go. It just took time to organize.
Oh, he was totally willing, but he's a very busy guy.
I was a very busy guy.
You're not that's true. You and the rest of the industry.
That's right.
And now you're living the good life in a hammock with a Mai Tai.
Hammock with a Mai Tai.
Oh, boy.
So before we go down that rabbit hole, why don't you tell us, Stan, how busy Mark has been over the past, 30 years, 40
200
years?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to try. So here we go, folks. Mark Stanley, resident lighting designer for New York City Ballet, has designed over 200 premieres for their repertoire, including Paul McCartney's Ocean Kingdom. He has worked with choreographers around the world, including Peter Martins, Alexei Ratmansky, Susan Stroman, Christopher Wheeldon, Justin Peck, William Forsythe, Kevin O'Day, Susan Marshall, and many others. His designs are in the repertoire of nearly every major ballet company in North America and Europe, including the Royal Ballet, the Paris Opera Ballet, the Royal Danish Ballet, Het Nationale Ballet, the Bolshoi Ballet, the San Francisco Ballet, La Scala Ballet, Mariinsky Ballet, Norwegian National Opera and Ballet, Boston Ballet, Stuttgart Ballet, Miami City Ballet, Pilobolus Dance Theater, Alvin Ailey Dance Theater, and the Joffrey Ballet. Mr. Stanley previously served as resident designer for the New York City Opera. His theater work includes the Kennedy Center, Long Wharf Theater, Goodspeed Opera House, Ordway Music Theater, Paper Mill Playhouse, Maurice Sendak's Night Kitchen, and Off-Broadway. His designs for George Balanchine's The Nutcracker and others have been seen on Live from Lincoln Center and great performances. Mr. Stanley also heads the lighting design program at Boston University and is on the board of directors of the Hemsley Lighting Programs. I have to breathe now, but wow, isn't that a life? Isn't that a career?
I have a question, Mark. When do you think your career is going to take off?
What is this story?
I mean, you've been doing this a long time.
Well, the one credit you didn't mention was Equity Library Theater, which back in the day was, once you'd done Equity Library Theater, you knew you'd made it, right? So
you are so right about that. I remember that now.
I think I even worked there.
Yeah,
I remember that. Everybody's saying, well, you got to work the Equity Library. That's the first big break that you have. Wow.
Well, Gilbert lit a cave outside of Madison, Wisconsin once, and he said his career had nowhere to go but up after that. So.
I got to start in a cave. I love it.
One thing that's not in your bio is that you are one of the original Gilbert Bunnies.
I am actually the last Gilbert Bunny.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dwayne Schuler and Steve Ross and actually, Danny Abelson could probably claim the credit to be the very first Gilbert Bunny, but Dwayne Schuler and I sort of bookend Gilbert's Bunny career.
Wow.
Nice.
How many years was that?
It's probably about 12 or 13 years. He started in Madison in the early 70s and then passed away in the fall of 1983.
Those were amazingly golden years. Now,
Oh, they really
I was
are.
fortunate to be a part of the last few years, and I learned so much from Gilbert. People who listen to the show know how fond I am of him, and so much of this business is being at the right place at the right time. And boy, you guys were. I mean, you went to the right school at the right time.
Yeah,
So-
it was an amazing time, for sure.
So let's get the ball rolling. And Steve has our first question.
So, Mark, let's backtrack here and talk about all that work in dance. How did you get started, and why do you keep doing it?
I was actually a pre-vet student my freshman year of undergrad. I had done a lot of theater, but this company came to William and Mary, where I was an undergrad student, called the Alwyn Nicolai Dance Theater. And he was a pioneer in the use of projection and color and multimedia, and really creating dance that was beyond movement. It was all about physicality of objects and shapes. And they did a residency there for a week at William and Mary, and I was on the lighting console as part of my work study. And after that, I changed my major. I said, I got to do that. I just have to do that. It was so amazing. Looking back on it, it was transformative. So, you know how you used to have to write on your resume at the top, you'd have to write your career objective. That was the thing you'd do, right? And by my senior year of undergrad, my career objective was to be the resident lighting designer of a dance company.
Wow.
So here we are.
Do you remember breaking that news to your parents?
Yeah, they kept the letter, actually. Yeah. Like, okay, I'm not going to be a veterinarian anymore.
Were you going to be specializing in horses? Or
large
pigs?
animal vet. That's what I wanted to do. Yeah. I grew up going to my grandparents' farm every summer, and so that was the beginning of that.
That explains all those coveralls you used to wear in the theater. And didn't you cook eggs for Gilbert?
Oh, we cooked everything for Gilbert. I remember my very first Thanksgiving in Madison, he looked at me and he said, "How do you do with batters?" And I said, "Batters?" And he said, "Yes, I was recently at the Kennedy Center and I tasted this Camembert cheese in a batter with raspberry sauce, and I want to serve it for Thanksgiving. Can you make that?" I spent the next 72 hours perfecting batters.
Wow. That's pretty cool, man.
But it was, and we had a great dance program at William and Mary, and I got to design at least 2 shows a year there. While I was an undergrad in dance. And I just fell in love with it. You don't know where your career is going to go when you start out, and you push on doors here and there. And I sort of kept my hand in dance when I went to Madison, and then professionally when I got to New York. But there were other ways to go at the time, and I was working with Gilbert and doing a lot of opera, and never thought that I would land a job as wonderful as the one at New York City Ballet. And when the opportunity came up, the door opened. And
absolutely.
At the time, they said, "Can you promise us you'll stay for 3 years?" and that was 35 years ago.
How long has that run been? Has it been 35 years?
Yeah, it's been 35 years.
I have a quick question. You're talking about dance and opera. What sort of musical background did you have as a child? Did you have any?
Yes, I had a lot of music. Both my parents were very musical, and I studied piano, guitar, trombone. I was in a jazz trombone group for 6 years, and we were in the church choir, and so I had a lot of music.
Do you still play any instruments?
I still play piano and guitar.
Guitar. Guys, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I know what you're thinking.
What am I thinking?
I was hoping for a trombone solo.
Trombone solo.
That I don't think my lips would be up for at this point.
Right. I thought we had a trombone player. Was that a sax player?
No, we have a tuba player, Don Holder.
Yeah, but
Don,
we also had...
that's right.
Rachel.
That's right.
Yeah, Rachel, the Hemsley winner. She plays an instrument.
There were 2 winners this year, weren't there, Mark?
Yes, we were able to offer the opportunity to 2 candidates, which was great, Avery and Rachel.
Right. Well, anyway, you do know about the Lumenoids, right?
Oh, I do.
Yes, well, we have some very famous lighting designers playing in the Lumenoids.
Wow.
Right?
It's also available on cassette for your car.
Yes, no, 8-track. We have only an 8-track. We don't have cassette. We have an 8-track of the song. But Zach Bovary plays guitar and bass on that track. And maybe we'll send you some tracks. You could lay one down for us.
We would love that.
I'll give it a
Can
try.
you imagine? Mark Stanley, that's fantastic. You could do a guitar solo or something like that. That would be so
I was
cool.
strictly the rhythm guy.
Okay, well, put a rhythm part in
Take
there.
some rhythm.
Put a rhythm part. We'll need a Stratocaster, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I could get my hands on one. My next door neighbor is John Schofield, so I think.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I could ask him for one of his guitars.
Better yet, ask him to lay down a
That's
track.
right. There you go. Really, I'll get him to do it and then claim it was me.
There you go. That's brilliant.
Well, again, it's kind of a follow-up, and I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is. Are you still surprised by your work in dance? Is everything, you just look at it and go, wow, this is a new direction, this is a new idea, this is something I haven't done before? Are you still as excited about dance today as you were 35 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what makes, for me, dance incredibly special is, when the curtain goes up on an opening night in dance, no one has ever seen that production before. The steps are new, the music may be commissioned, the design is brand new and only for that moment in time. And that doesn't say that a Shakespeare production or an opera production of La Bohème can't be new and fresh, but there's something incredibly exciting about working with a choreographer and with dancers and creating something totally from scratch. And, that sustains you for many, many years.
It's like you write the play together, don't you? Comes out of your own minds.
Yeah, you write the play and you create the environment and you support the mood and you do all the things that lighting designers do for all shows, but there's something extra special about it when it's that kind of partnership.
And it's also much more expressionistic. You have a lot more freedom as a lighting designer, don't you think?
Well, I don't know if I would call it freedom, but because you're not working in a realistic context, when you are dealing with abstract images, you do have that. And also, 9 times out of 10, it's just you and the choreographer in the room. There's a costume designer, but it's an open space. And so that space is defined by light. And
None of those annoying set designers.
that's right. No columns in the way, no ceilings hanging over.
No ceiling, right?
Yeah.
That's why you're so young. You've stayed so young. You and a choreographer. How fabulous.
So my question is a little bit about the obvious, Mark. So color has evolved in terms of how we make it lately. Tell us about your journey with color and in particular the light workbook that you put together.
Yeah, well, I really didn't know much about color as an undergrad. I mean, we studied the basics. You could pick up any lighting textbook and see the chapter on color, and that's about as far as it went with what we were studying.
Right.
But when I got to Madison, Gilbert insisted that we take a class in the fine arts, in the visual arts department on color. It was taught by a woman named Marjorie Kralik. She was a brilliant, brilliant teacher, and specifically about color. And I'd really never delved into it like that, and it just kind of blew my mind. I mean, she opened up this world of expression that I had never had before. And I ended up taking an independent study with her every semester that I was in Madison, just because it was such a fertile pursuit for me. And so then when I got to, I guess the other part of the equation there is that Stan Miller from Roscoe was a good friend of Gilbert's. And he came to Madison at least once, if not twice, while I was there. Because, prior to grad school, my sense of color was Roscaline 802 and Cinemoy 561. And that's about all I knew about color. So, because of the connection to Roscoe, I knew that was an early sort of foothold in New York, I guess. So I kind of knew all the Roscoe people. And a guy named Rob Holly decided to put together this video that was primarily, for promotional purposes. But and Stan Schwartz, who was with Roscoe at the time, he said, and sadly just recently passed away too. He said, well, why don't we need a workbook that goes with this? A workbook would be a good idea. So, I was already working on the video, doing the lighting for that, and that's how that started. But, my journey with color has just been a fascinating one. And one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about now is that I want to create and help create a vocabulary of color that works in all media. So, one of the problems is that we get trapped by words that apply only to pigment and dye or apply only to light. And so I created a class in Boston called Color Interaction. And it was based on the fact that one day I was walking through backstage, and the scene painter was talking to one of the lighting students. And the scene painter was saying, I need you to make the backdrop more intense. And the lighting designer said, I can't make it more intense. Everything's at full. And I thought,
that's the problem.
Houston, we have a problem here. And so I said, okay, this needs to be a class. And so I created this class. It's a riff on Alber's book, Interaction of Color. And I call it Color Interaction. And it's made up of scene designers, costume designers, scene painters, and lighting designers. And we work through the projects together to try and develop this whole vocabulary of color. And so, that's my goal, is to try and get people to be able to talk about color as color and use the right words when they're talking about it. And Wendy at ETC and Clifton and I, we go into lots of wonderful conversations about what these words really mean and how we apply them. But I'm excited about. I love LED lighting color. I just don't like moving it from venue to venue. That's that's the problem,
Is it venue to venue or is it fixture to fixture?
Well, both really. I mean, I did a piece for ABT this spring, and we had a double LED ground row of two different manufacturers. So I was not only mixing within each ground row, but I was additively mixing between the ground rows. And the show was supposed to open in March at San Francisco Ballet. And they have a totally different manufacturer for their ground row. And it was just a nightmare, the idea that all of these, 85, 90 light cues, each one of them with a different color mix,
It's a big issue, like in tungsten lamps, they were able to make fairly good manufacturing consistency, and LED manufacturing, it's like an art. Everybody makes it, they bake the cake a little bit differently.
Yeah. So, starting from scratch, it's great. It's the transference that's the issue.
I have a follow-up kind of creative process question for you, Mark. Are you finding that having the flexibility to alter color in the room, in the moment with the choreographer, and you don't have to change the gel and get a crew out there, does that sort of change the way you work and provide a sort of a more free-flowing aesthetic? Or is it too many choices, or is it actually an advantage to have that freedom in the rooms, in that spontaneity?
I find it a total advantage. I mean, for me, it's about the nuances that I can create at that moment. And I can tweak that color for every light cue in a way that we could never do it before. And it's exciting. And you can make a whole journey with the color that's very, very detailed. So I love it.
I'm glad to hear that because I think it's pretty cool too.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, the lighting staff at New York City Ballet doesn't like it at all. When I'm like, they have a biscuit by the table backstage, and they hear me starting to create a new color, and they're
said,
like,
"Oh, no,
we got to archive another color." What do we call that? 51.7402. You know.
Right. Well, then Roscoe will give it a name, and it'll be Stanley Blue.
Right, exactly.
But do you have a color, Mark? You should.
I created the Hemsley Blue, which is Roscoe 361.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. That was just a wonderful gift that Stan Miller came up with, and all the proceeds from it go to support the Hemsley lighting programs. So
yeah, wonderful.
It's great.
Speaking of the Hemsley lighting programs, the Hemsley Internship has been such an important aspect for our industry. Tell us about your connection and about your stewardship of the program.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, I was the last Gilbert Bunny, and when he died, there was just a tremendous outpouring from all of the people who had been influenced by his life, many of whom are still working in the business today. And we wanted to create some kind of memorial, some kind of recognition of the importance of his life on our lives. And so I was with New York City Opera at the time, and it became clear that would be a really good place to house an internship. And so it started really from contributions of all former students for the most part. And I think the first internship was in 1984.
Helen McCullough, right?
Helen McCullough, right.
Right.
And she's helping us today with the portfolio review and helping
Give her
us.
my love, please.
Yeah,
okay?
I will.
Yeah.
And then, it slowly evolved. And then when I moved to New York City Ballet, that was, let's add that experience into the mix. And then in the early 90s, we became our own 501c3 nonprofit. And, it just kept growing and growing. And then we added in the early 2000s the portfolio review. So, it's been a great, we never thought it would last. We thought it would be a 3 to 5 year thing, and that would be it. And here we are. So
You created a monster.
Yeah. But I do have to give a shout out to Ellen Soren, the president of the board. And she's just been a tremendous partner in all of this. And of course, the rest of the board as well.
What a blessing that you guys have done here. In Gilbert's memory, and it would be the internship that he would design.
Yeah, I think so. It really, there's so many aspects of it that are part of his, personality in life.
Right.
And, it's been just a great tribute. Yeah.
How do you, though, replicate that personality? Listeners of our show, they hear me talk about Gilbert a lot. And a big part of it was that he was such a strong personality in the theater, and always a great personality in the theater. Everything was going to be okay when Gilbert walked into the room. Is anyone doing this anymore?
I think there are a lot of people like that. I often think that Philip Rosenberg is sort of a Gilbert in a lot of ways, he's always got his mom's cookies on the tech table.
Yeah, there you go.
He's always got a smile on his face, He's ready to give anybody a hug. And, I think that there are just, and a lot of Gilbert's former students. Dwayne Schuler, Alan Edelman, those guys are still out there sort of living the life that we did when we were working with Gilbert.
Now, I'm going to just veer off a bit because since we're talking about Gilbert, Gilbert would bring several of his students with him all the time. Sometimes 6 or 7, if I remember correctly. And you guys would all cook together. You guys hang out together. You would eat together. You do everything together, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much a I don't know what would you call it. It wasn't a club. It was
a commune.
It was a bit of a commune. Yeah,
It was your tribe.
I mean, when you had 8 people sleeping on the floor of the Mayflower Hotel,
the Mayflower. I just remember that hotel in Miami when we were doing that show there, and it was this tiny little room, but all of Gilbert's students had their sleeping bags with them and everything, and it was amazing, the feeling of community and the feeling of theater. And I think that he had cooking classes too. Is that correct?
Well, not on the road, but we certainly did at home, when we were in Madison. I mean, like I was saying, it was, you got assigned a task to do for any dinner, and that was your sort of area. But going shopping with Gilbert was an amazing experience because it usually took like 2 or 3 shopping carts to get through the grocery store. And I've never seen anybody buy, steaks the size of Gilbert that he would buy, to put on the grill. And one of my earliest responsibilities was to take lemon juice and squirt the flames on the grill so that the lemon juice would infuse the meat. Listen
to this.
Yeah, I learned a lot about cooking from Gilbert. Actually.
You guys are pros. So tell us, what is your favorite Gilbert story? Because you spent a lot of years with Gilbert.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I wish I'd had more. I was there as a student for 3 years, and then I was with him about 2.5 years in New York before he died. My favorite Gilbert story is really my first night in New York with Gilbert. I had come up, he was working on a show at the Booth Theater called Monteith and Rand, and we focused the show that day. Jim Spradling was the assistant on the show.
He was a great assistant. He was the assistant's assistant.
Yeah, his drafting is still the benchmark of all, and paperwork. But we got back to the Mayflower, and we're sitting there having a drink, and Gilbert looks at me. He says, "This is your first night in New York. What are we doing in a hotel room? We should be out on the town." And so we went back out. We basically stayed out all night long. I'll spare you the details so that you can actually put this on the air. But we went to a lot of clubs. Let's put it that way. And we ended up at a little restaurant in Little Italy having white wines and scallops for breakfast. And we went outside the restaurant, hopped in a cab, and got to the 8 o'clock work call the next morning.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
So that was my first night in New York City.
And you thought every night in New York was going to be like that.
That's right, of course.
Great story.
Well, let me ask you, Mark, you've certainly been involved in training and teaching for some time. You've been up at Boston University for what? You said 16 years?
16 years now.
How's that going?
Well, it's going great, except that, we hit this little thing called a pandemic, and those challenges. You guys are feeling it. Everybody's feeling it, right? It's just how do you pivot so quickly to keep the education going? I was lucky. I actually had the fall off for a sabbatical, and so I came back, pretty refreshed and ready to go. And it was just a little bit of a shock to have to, after only 8 weeks, change gears. But, it's been a great experience. Teaching is harder than lighting any show I've ever lit. It is really a huge challenge. And I'm responsible for both a BFA and an MFA group. And, creating and sustaining a student's education over 4 years, my hat's off to everybody that's done it, because it's really, really quite challenging. But I think we've done a pretty good job there. The exciting thing for us is that we moved into our new home about 3 years ago now. And that's just been a sea change in the way we teach and how we do shows. Prior to that, we shared a theater with the Huntington Theater Company. And it's a beautiful theater, but everything around it, the infrastructure around it, was just really ancient. And so now we're state of the art, and we're really able to, I think, give an in-depth study of lighting, design, and theater on a lot of levels that we could never do it before. So that's been great. But, for me personally as a teacher, it was, the 15 years before the sabbatical, I was not a trained teacher. And so it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of figuring it out. There were programs and there were projects that I used from when I was a student that were no longer really working and everything. So the sabbatical was a good chance to kind of revisit everything and come back and, try and look at creating a program for the next 15 years and see where that goes.
What do you think the future is in teaching for you? Is it with technology, and what parts of technology?
Well, I am a bit of a dinosaur. I mean, I really believe that the fundamentals of design are what I want to teach, and I leave the teaching of technology to the younger faculty. And I'm great. Have a great partner now in Jorge Arroyo, who joined the faculty about 2 years ago, and he's really good at that stuff. I like teaching about art and design and theater and what makes it special. And so, I'll continue to do that. But the challenge is that, as you guys know, the careers that are out there are not necessarily grounded in theater anymore. I guess they're grounded in theater because a lot of people like to hire theater students, but it's a different career. Certainly different than when I came into the business. So, my goal really is to sort of meld the two worlds. There's so much pressure to teach technology now,
Right. The students want it. They want to be programmers, and you can't blame them because it's very exciting, but it's difficult for people like us who basically are focused in the art.
Yeah. And, for every hour that I'm teaching a student how to program a light board, that's an hour we're not talking about design.
Right.
And, how many layers and how many classes are in Vectorworks. I mean,
my God. Don't get us started. You don't want to hear this.
But I sort of fall back to a conversation I had with a Broadway designer recently who one of my students was programming for. And he said he's a fantastic programmer. And I said, well, that's great, because I didn't teach him anything about programming. I said, so what makes him such a good collaborator, a colleague or a good programmer? And the designer said, well, he's a critical thinker. He's a problem solver. He's a creative artist, and he's collaborative. I said, right. Great. I taught him all of that.
That I'll take credit for.
That's right. I didn't teach him anything about programming. So.
That's wonderful.
But that makes the point, it's both.
Yeah.
These days, it really is both.
So, Mark, you've had a full career and a very honorable one. Is there anything that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
Rock and roll. Yeah, I haven't done any rock and roll, and I want to do rock and roll.
All right, nice.
And everybody says it's totally backwards, right? I mean, I did opera for the first part, ballet in the middle, and it should be rock and roll at the front end. But no, I mean, I look at my colleagues. I look at Alan and the work he does in TV lighting, and I go, man, I want to do that. And I've gotten to know Bob Barnhart recently, and I'm like, man, I want to do that. And then I see Stephen Rosen and what he's doing with available light and all the architectural work he does. I go, oh, wow. Yeah, and I go, man, I want to do that, and Heather Carson and her work, and I go, man, I want to do that. And then
the fine art,
and then I say, I just want to be Jim Ingalls for a day, if I could just be Jim Ingalls for a day, because his career is just so amazing, and the collaborators he has. So yeah, there's so much that I haven't done and that I would love to do, but yeah, rock and roll, that's the big one.
Well, I have 2 words for you if you want to do rock and roll.
Be young.
No, Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
I mean, that's rock and roll.
If you get a shot, never turn anything down.
That's right.
I got a call to go see a band, and I went to see them in a club, and they were the worst things I had ever seen. They were called Wild Country. And I mean, people were throwing bottles at him.
You are in Texas.
6 months later, they changed their name to Alabama.
Wow.
So you just never know who's going to make
That's
it.
true. You never know. Speaking of that, we're talking about the students and careers. And so, for those people listening out there who are early in their career, and what do you see on the horizon? And if you have any words of wisdom to people starting out, Mark, what would you tell them?
Well, I probably would tell them the same thing now that I would have told them 5 months ago before, the lockdown. But I mean, I think right now the key is just stay hopeful. I mean, this is going to pass and theater's going to come back. It's an essential part of our lives and it's going to be there. So, it may take you a little bit longer to get started, but you've got to stay hopeful. You got to be patient. You got to you got to persevere. It's not going to happen overnight. But, you have to cast a wide net in today's world. You can't, when students sit there, when they come to interview for being a student at Boston University, they say, well, I want to be an opera designer. I want to be a dance designer. I'm like, maybe you just want to be a lighting designer. Maybe
that's a good
that's a good place to start and see where your career goes. And, now you got to take advantage of this time. I mean, there's so many resources online right now that are for free. And, make all the things that you can't learn while you're in school or didn't learn while you were in school. You can take advantage of this time to really build your base. I mean, this was actually a Gilbert quote, and I don't think it was even originated with him, but I stole it. And then now people think I say it, but I think I've heard other people say it as well. And that is, the broader the base, the higher the pyramid. And, you just have to continually broaden that base so you can get higher and higher and higher in what you want to do. So, yeah. And I guess the final stuff I would say is you got to respect your colleagues. You got to say thank you. You got to, be nice to everybody on your way up because you sure as hell meet them on the way down. I mean, so, yeah. I mean, it's a challenging career. There's no question about it. And it takes fortitude. You got to be strong. But the rewards are tremendous. So hang in there.
Nice.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. I just have one thing to say. Well, I have two things to say. One is this has been an incredible pleasure, speaking for my brothers, and I'm sure they'll tag on here, to have you here. And you bring such a wealth of experience and knowledge and kindness to our industry. And the other thing I really want to say is Gilbert's looking down today and smiling.
Thanks.
I cannot think of a better person to pick up the reins and to keep the spirit going. Thank you from me and also from all my colleagues for doing that.
Well, it's been a labor of love and one I'm happy to do and continue for as long as I possibly can.
Mark, thank you so much. You laid down so much information in 43 minutes. You are now an official member of the Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers Legacy. What is it, David?
Legends of Light.
Legends of Light. That's right. You're in the pantheon.
You basically get a coffee mug. We'll send you a coffee mug. Right? That's about it. But don't put it in the dishwasher because everything will fall off of it. It's not dishwasher safe.
Well, I'll drink from it with pleasure.
You will put scotch in it. It works really well, scotch.
Do we have any extra shot glasses we can get him? We out of shot glasses already.
Use the coffee mug. You drink more.
It's bigger.
It works a lot better. And if you use alcohol in it, you don't have to clean it ever. Because it's, you clean it with the alcohol all the time, right?
I like that.
We got to get you on the song too somehow.
Oh yes, well I was going to throw that in the end here, right about now. Well, the rocking sounds of the Lumenoids, soon to be joined by Mark Stanley playing something we don't know yet, tell us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk Insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
If you should choose to litigate us, the law firm of Fleck, Flock, Flair, and Glare, and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Katona, Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss even more deeper mysteries of lighting design and technology on Light Talk.
All that, and we'll bring you a sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Stay healthy and stay happy. And bye-bye from Light Talk. And thank you, Mark.
Thank you guys.
Great interview. Yeah, fantastic.
Cool.
Light Talk.